I was born with jade hands that could heal any illness. When the emperor was dying from the wasting sickness, I worked for 3 days straight to save him, but I never got the credit. Instead, my fiancé Lord Kaikshuan presented his lover, Imperial, consort Ruyi, as the miraculous healer. "You're just a nameless village girl," he told me with a cruel smile. "Ruyi has royal blood. Who deserves the glory? Who deserves me?" Then I received an invitation to their wedding, delivered by a servant, who laughed at my tears. That night, as they celebrated their union, I drank poison and died with one thought. The emperor's sickness would return, and this time, they would suffer without my healing powers. Then I opened my eyes 5 years earlier. Heaven had given me another chance. I was born with hands that glowed jade under moonlight, a gift from heaven itself. My mother used to say the gods blessed me because I had a pure heart. I believed her until my heart shattered, only to be reborn harder and colder than jade itself. My name is Bai Lihua. I lived as a humble apothecary at the edge of the capital during the Great Ming Dynasty. While court physicians treated nobles with expensive imported medicines, I healed villagers with herbs I gathered myself, remedies passed down through generations of women in my family. Most remarkable were my hands, which emitted a faint jade glow when I mixed particularly potent cures. Villagers whispered that my touch could coax life back from death's doorstep. I never sought fame or recognition. I was content with my simple existence until Lord Zhao Kaishuan entered my shop one autumn afternoon. He came seeking treatment for his ailing mother, having heard rumors of my abilities when all court physicians had failed her. "They say your hands contain the essence of jade stone itself," he said, his noble attire and confident posture marking him as far above my station. Yet his eyes held no contempt, only curiosity, and something I mistook for admiration. I worked through the night, preparing a special elixir for his mother. When I delivered it to their manor house the next day, she recovered within hours. Lord Kaishuan looked at me as if seeing a rare treasure. "Your hands are blessed by the gods themselves," he told me as he began to court me, bringing gifts and spending evenings discussing medicine and philosophy. "Together we will rise at court." I fell deeply in love with this handsome nobleman who seemed to value my skills above my station. When he proposed marriage, I believed heaven had blessed me twice, first with healing hands, then with a husband who truly saw me. 3 seasons passed in happiness as we prepared for our wedding. Then Emperor Huizong fell ill with the mysterious wasting sickness. His skin turned transparent as rice paper, revealing the blue tracery of veins beneath. His strength ebbed daily, until he could barely lift his head from the imperial pillow. Court physicians tried everything, but the emperor worsened with each passing day. One night, imperial guards appeared at my door. "The emperor's condition deteriorates," the captain said. "Lord Kaikshuan has suggested your remedies as a final hope." My heart swelled with pride that my betrothed had such faith in my abilities. I gathered my herbs and instruments, following the guards to the forbidden city where I had never before stepped foot. The palace astounded me with its vastness and splendor, halls of gleaming marble and gold stretching endlessly. Yet I had little time to marvel. I was led directly to the emperor's private chambers where he lay, barely breathing, attended by anxious physicians and trembling servants. For 3 days and nights, I worked without rest, brewing complex elixirs from rare mountain herbs, applying jadestone compresses to the emperor's fevered body, and whispering ancient healing incantations taught by my grandmother. I slept in brief moments beside his bed, monitoring every change in his condition. During these exhausting days, while court officials paced anxiously and empress consorts wept, only Prince Huayu, the emperor's scholarly youngest son, showed genuine interest in my methods rather than just results. "The way you combine these herbs defies conventional medicine," he observed quietly, helping me grind rare fungi to powder. You treat the spirit as well as the body. I was too focused on saving the Emperor to notice the warmth in Prince Huayu's eyes, or how his hands lingered near mine as we worked. My thoughts remained with Kaishuan, and how our lives would change when the Emperor recovered through my treatment. On the dawn of the 4th day, Emperor Huizong opened his eyes, clear-minded and strong for the first time in weeks. Color returned to his face as he took his first proper meal. The palace erupted in celebration. The Emperor wishes to thank his savior personally, a court official told me, instructing me to wait behind a screen in the grand throne room while they prepared a formal ceremony. It would not be proper for an untitled commoner to approach directly. I understood court protocol required such formalities. I smoothed my simple robes and waited to be called forward, heart racing with the knowledge that my life would forever change. Through a crack in the screen, I watched as the grand throne room filled with officials and nobles in their finest attire. Lord Kaixuan entered with Imperial Consort Feng Ruyi on his arm, a woman I recognized from court paintings, known for her extraordinary beauty and connections to the imperial family. My betrothed had never mentioned knowing her personally. I felt a flicker of unease as I noticed how confidently they walked together, as if long accustomed to each other's presence. "Your Majesty," Kaixuan announced with a deep bow, "my beloved Ruyi has been blessed by the celestial gods with healing powers. It was her secret remedy, passed through generations of her noble family, that has restored your imperial health." From behind the screen, I froze in disbelief as Ruyi detailed her treatment methods, descriptions stolen word for word from my own lips during my conversations with Kaixuan. The Emperor, grateful beyond measure, showered Ruyi with gifts, bestowing upon her the title Imperial Healer, while elevating Kaixuan's position at court. I stood motionless, unable to breathe as my achievement was stolen before my eyes. Not once did Kaixuan mention my name or contribution. Not once did anyone look toward the screen where I remained hidden, my jade hands trembling in shock. Later that evening, as I gathered my few belongings to leave the palace unacknowledged, Kaixuan cornered me in a garden pavilion. Gone was the gentle admiration I had treasured. His eyes now held only cold calculation. "Do not look so wounded, Li Hua," he whispered, glancing around to ensure no one observed our conversation. "You are a nameless village girl with strange talents. Ruyi is 5th cousin to the Emperor himself. Which of you deserves the glory? Which of you deserves me? You promised we would rise together," I said, voice barely audible as my world collapsed around me. He laughed softly. "Did you truly believe a lord would marry an apothecary? Your hands may glow with jade light, but your blood remains common. Ruyi offers connections I could never gain through you." 3 days later, a palace servant delivered an invitation to their wedding, her lips curling into a smirk as she handed it over. "Lord Kaixuan said you might wish to see his happiness firsthand. A kindness, he called it." On their wedding night, I stood in the shadows outside the celebration hall, watching through windows as lanterns illuminated their lavish ceremony. Kaixuan looked handsome in his wedding finery, while Ruyi gleamed with jewels and triumph. Courtiers, who had never acknowledged my existence, toasted the miraculous healer who had saved their emperor. In my hand, I held a vial of nightshade tincture I had prepared that morning. As their wedding cups touched in celebration, I drank my poison, in solitude. My last conscious thought was of the emperor's illness, which I knew would return without my specialized treatments. No courtier who pretended to administer my cure could possibly understand its complexities. "Heaven," I whispered as darkness claimed me, "grant me justice." Then I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through the paper windows of my humble apothecary shop. For a moment, I thought the afterlife resembled my mortal existence, until I noticed the calendar on my wall. Somehow, heaven had answered my plea, returning me to 5 years before my betrayal. I spent the first day of my second life simply breathing, touching objects in my shop to confirm they were real. I examined my reflection in a bronze mirror, noting how young I looked, how innocent my eyes still were. 5 years. Heaven had given me 5 years to change my fate. My first instinct was to avoid Kai Xuan entirely, to refuse his entry when he eventually came seeking treatment for his mother. But that night, as I lay awake planning my new future, I realized something fundamental had changed within me. I did not want to merely escape my fate. I wanted justice. This time, I approached my life differently. I still healed the sick who came to my door, but now I also studied the effects of plants that could harm as well as heal. I cultivated poisonous herbs alongside my medicinal ones, learning how certain toxins could mimic natural ailments or work so slowly they remained undetectable. I practiced calligraphy and courtly manners, investing my meager earnings in trade ventures with merchants who supplied my rare ingredients. Within a year, my simple hut transformed into a proper establishment with an apprentice to help mix basics, remedies. When Lord Zhao Kaishuan eventually arrived seeking treatment for his mother, I was prepared. I greeted him with professional courtesy rather than the awestruck admiration of my previous life. I cured his mother efficiently, accepting payment without lingering conversation. "Your reputation does not do justice to your skills," he said, clearly intrigued by my cool demeanor. "Most village healers boast of abilities they do not possess, yet you understate yours." I merely smiled. "Results speak louder than words, my lord." He returned the following week with a gift of rare medicinal herbs, clearly expecting to initiate the same courtship as before. I accepted the herbs with polite thanks, then immediately attended to another customer, offering him no opportunity for personal conversation. His pursuit became more determined with each rebuff. Where once I had been flattered by his attention, I now saw the calculation behind his charm, the way his eyes assessed my value to his ambitions. 2 years into my new life, Imperial Consort Feng Ruyi visited my shop for the first time, drawn by rumors of effective beauty remedies. She arrived with an entourage of servants, her elegant robes and jeweled hairpins marking her as far above my station, yet she did not recognize the woman she would one day betray. How could she? In her eyes, I was just another commoner to use and discard. "Your reputation grows, Apothecary Bai," she said, examining my shop with thinly veiled condescension. "I require something to enhance my beauty. I have caught the eye of Lord Zhao Kaishuan, and I intend to keep it." "How fortunate," I replied, carefully hiding my bitter smile as I mixed a special tonic. "This will preserve your beauty for decades to come." I did not mention the herb I added that would ensure she maintained her beauty but would render her permanently unable to conceive an heir, a devastating fate for a noble woman whose value lay partly in producing sons. The effects would take years to become apparent, long after physicians could connect it to my remedy. "You should take this weekly," I instructed, charging her an exorbitant price which she paid without hesitation. Beauty requires consistent attention. Month by month, I watched history begin to repeat itself with subtle differences. Kaishuan courted Ruyi openly, never recognizing the village girl he would have married in another life. I sold beauty potions to court ladies, amassing wealth and subtle influence. When Kaishuan's romantic overtures to me cooled in favor of pursuing Ruyi, I feigned disappointment while secretly rejoicing. I expanded my shop, hiring more apprentices and establishing connections with court officials who came seeking remedies for their private ailments. I dressed in finer robes, adorned my hair with modest but quality pins, and cultivated the persona of a respectable, knowledgeable healer rather than a mystical village girl. 3 years after my rebirth, I began selling a special virility tonic to noblemen concerned about producing heirs. Lord Kaixuan, now engaged to Ruyi and anxious to secure his position through offspring, became one of my regular customers. This will ensure strong sons, I told him as he purchased his monthly supply, the jade glow of my hands carefully hidden beneath long sleeves. Take it daily without fail. What I didn't tell him was that this particular formulation, designed specifically for him, contained herbs that would gradually render him as barren as his future wife. The ultimate revenge against a man who valued bloodlines above integrity, to deny him the legacy he craved. 4 years into my second life, whispers spread that Emperor Huizong had fallen ill with strange symptoms. His skin was becoming translucent, his strength fading daily. I recognized the beginning stages of the wasting sickness that had brought me to the palace in my previous life. The palace sent for every healer in the province. This time, when the imperial summons arrived at my door, I declined, sending word I was traveling to distant mountains to gather rare medicinal herbs. Let Ruyi, now Kaishuan's wife, and a respected court consort, attempt to claim healing powers, without my knowledge to steal. From my informants at court, I learned that Ruyi had confidently claimed she could cure the emperor, having been gifted with celestial healing knowledge. Kaishuan supported her assertions, both of them seeking the same advancement they had achieved through my work in my previous life. My wife's healing powers are unmatched, he apparently told the court, though my sources reported worry lining his face as the emperor grew weaker despite Rui's treatments. Day after day, Rui's attempts failed. The emperor's condition worsened, until he could barely speak, his skin so transparent that palace servants claimed they could see his heart beating within his chest. Court physicians attempted their own cures, but nothing slowed the progression of the illness. I remained absent, watching from afar as panic spread throughout the capital. Common people burned incense in temples, praying for their emperor's recovery. Nobles prepared for the worst, positioning themselves for the potential chaos of succession. Only when the emperor was at death's door did I return to the capital, making no effort to announce my presence. I knew they would come for me eventually. True power, I had learned, comes not from seeking attention, but from making oneself indispensable. When imperial guards finally broke down my door in desperation, they found me calmly drinking tea in my private quarters, dressed in embroidered silks finer than what many minor nobles could afford. My shop had transformed from a humble hut to an elegant establishment with multiple rooms and several apprentices. "The Emperor requires your immediate presence," the captain announced, clearly expecting me to scramble in fear and reverence. Instead, I took my time gathering specific remedies I had prepared months in advance, precisely for this moment. "I have been expecting this summons," I said, watching confusion cross his face. "Lead the way." At the palace, Kaishuan didn't recognize me at first. When I entered the emperor's chambers, he was arguing with physicians while Ruyi wept dramatically by the imperial bedside. 5 years had added lines of ambition to his face, hardened the once charming smile into something calculating and cold. When our eyes met, realization dawned slowly. He blanched, seeing not the simple village girl he'd discarded in another life, but a composed, elegant woman whose reputation now rivaled that of court physicians. My jade-glowing hands, which I no longer bothered to hide, were now the emperor's last hope. "Apothecary Bai," he said, trying to maintain composure. "You honor us with your presence." "I come for the emperor, not for you," I replied coolly, moving past him to examine the imperial patient. Emperor Huizong lay pale and transparent, exactly as I remembered from my previous life. His breathing came in shallow gasps, his pulse fluttering weakly beneath my fingers. The sickness had progressed further than before. Kaishuan approached me as I began unpacking my remedies. "Save him," he begged, falling to his knees before me, all pretense of nobility abandoned in desperation. "Ruyi cannot replicate her previous success. The physicians have failed. We will give you anything." "Anything?" I asked softly, as Ruyi watched from the corner. her reputation crumbling before the entire court. For the first time, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. How interesting that you suddenly value my humble skills. I took my time examining the emperor, aware of every eye upon me, including those of Prince Huayu, who stood quietly in the corner, observing with the same thoughtful intelligence I remembered. Unlike the others, he showed no surprise at my transformed appearance. Perhaps he had noticed me even when I was invisible to the rest of the court. "I will need a private chamber adjoining the emperor's rooms," I said, my voice carrying the authority I had cultivated over my second lifetime. "No one enters except by my invitation. I require complete silence for 3 days." Court officials exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared object. The emperor's breath rattled in his chest, growing weaker by the hour. "Anything you need is yours," the chief eunuch assured me, bowing deeply. I approached the emperor's bedside, taking his fragile hand in mine. Beneath the papery skin, I could feel the faintest pulse. Leaning close to his ear, I whispered, "I will heal you, Your Majesty, but this time you will know exactly whose hands bring you back from death's door." As servants prepared the adjoining chamber, I caught Kai Xuan watching me with a complex mixture of hope and fear. Rui stood beside him, her perfect face streaked with tears that I suspected were more for her own future than the emperor's health. "Lord Zhao," I called, loud enough for nearby officials to hear. "Since your wife previously cured His Majesty, perhaps she could explain her methods to aid my work." Rui paled. The methods were, that is to say, "Forgive my wife," Kai Xuan interrupted smoothly. "The stress of His Majesty's condition has affected her memory. Perhaps it would be best if you proceeded with your own expertise." "How curious," I replied with a cold smile. "One would think such miraculous knowledge would be impossible to forget." For 3 days, I worked in the private chamber, allowing only Prince Huayu to assist me. I administered the remedy I had perfected years ago in preparation for this exact moment. A complex elixir that required precise timing and specific incantations. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Prince Huayu asked quietly on the second day as we ground rare fungi into powder. "There's a certainty to your movements that speaks of previous success." I glanced up, surprised by his perception. "What makes you say that, Your Highness?" "You arrived with exactly the right ingredients, as if you knew precisely what ailed my father before seeing him. And you look at Lord Kaikshuan and Consort Rui with eyes that have already judged them." I considered my words carefully. "Let's say heaven has granted me certain insights. What would you do with such knowledge, Prince Huayu?" "Seek justice without cruelty," he answered simply, "though I understand the temptation toward the latter." His response gave me pause, but I had come too far to reconsider my path. The Emperor's health improved gradually under my care, his skin becoming less transparent, his breathing more regular. By the 7th day, he sat upright, weak but clearly recovering. As he regained lucidity, I spent hours by his bedside, ostensibly, monitoring his condition. During these quiet moments, I whispered certain truths while we were alone. "Your Majesty," I murmured one evening as he dozed, "did you know that Consort Rui has never possessed healing powers? 5 years ago, in another life, it was my hands that saved you, while she took credit for my work." The Emperor's eyes fluttered open. "What do you mean, another life?" "Heaven has its ways of righting wrongs," I said. Consort Rui claimed abilities she never possessed, with Lord Kaichuan's assistance. They built their position at court on that deception. On another occasion, I mentioned casually, despite Consort Rui's promises of producing imperial grandsons, she is unable to conceive, a condition that predates her marriage, though she has hidden it well. Each seed of truth I planted took root in the Emperor's mind. I saw it in the way his eyes narrowed when Rui was mentioned, how he observed Kaishuan with growing suspicion during brief court visits to his sick room. By the 10th day, Emperor Huizong was strong enough to hold a small court gathering in his chambers. Court officials marveled at his recovery, attributing it to my jade-glowing hands, which I now displayed openly. "Apothecary Bai has twice saved our life," the Emperor announced, silencing the room with this strange statement. Only he and I knew the truth behind his words. "While others have lied and schemed, we name her Imperial Physician, highest among healers in our realm." Ruyi's face froze in a mask of disbelief, while Kaishuan struggled to maintain his composure. Their carefully constructed position was crumbling before the entire court. "Your Majesty," Kaishuan began, "perhaps in your illness you've forgotten that my wife—" "Silence," the Emperor commanded. "We have learned much during our recovery. Consort Ruyi, step forward." Ruyi approached the imperial dais, trembling slightly. "Your Majesty? You claimed to possess healing gifts, yet when we fell ill again, you could not replicate your miracle. Explain this discrepancy." Ruyi fell to her knees. "Your Majesty, the pressure of your illness, I was overcome with fear." "A true healer does not falter under pressure," the Emperor interrupted. "Nor does she claim another's achievements as her own." The court erupted in whispers as the Emperor continued. "We strip you of the title Imperial Healer and remove you from our court. You will return to your family province immediately." Kaishuan stepped forward, ready to defend his wife, but the Emperor turned to him next. "Lord Zhao, we expected better judgment from you. Your ambition has clouded your honor. You are relieved of your court position." As Imperial guards moved to escort the disgraced couple from the chamber, the Emperor made one final, unexpected pronouncement. "Such wisdom and loyalty as Apothecary Bai's deserves the highest reward. We offer our son, Prince Huayu, as husband, to the woman who has preserved the imperial line." A gasp rippled through the court. For a moment, I stood frozen in shock. In my plans for revenge, I had never imagined this outcome. Prince Huayu, who had always shown me respect even in my previous life, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "It would be my honor to marry someone of such extraordinary gifts and character," he said, his eyes meeting mine with genuine warmth. In that moment, standing before the court that had once rendered me invisible, I felt a strange duality. Part of me rejoiced in the perfect execution of my revenge, Kaishuan and Ruyi stripped of everything they had gained through deception. Yet another part wondered at this unexpected turn toward a future I had never planned. That evening, as I packed my belongings to move from my temporary quarters to the imperial residence, Kaishuan found a way past the guards to confront me one last time. "How did you do it?" he demanded, his handsome face haggard with shock and fear. "How did you turn the Emperor against us so completely?" I regarded him calmly, remembering the girl who had once loved him, who had believed his promises of a shared future. She seemed a stranger to me now. "I simply told the truth," I replied. "Something you might have considered before building your future on lies." "You've destroyed us," he said, voice breaking. "Rui's family will disown her when they learn of her disgrace. We face exile, without resources or connections." "How unfortunate," I said, echoing his words from my previous life. "But you're a resourceful man, Lord Zhao. Surely you can find someone else to use as a stepping stone." "Li Hua, please," he begged, falling to his knees. "The Emperor has stripped Ruyi of her titles. He speaks of exiling us both to the western frontier. You have his ear now. You must help us for what we once meant to each other." I looked down at him, this man who had once seemed the center of my world, now reduced to begging at my feet. I had dreamed of this moment for years, planned for it, nurtured my revenge like a precious herb in my garden. Yet now that it had arrived, I felt strangely hollow. "But Lord Zhao," I said softly, using the same words he had once used to dismiss Me, I'm just a nameless village girl with strange talents. What could I possibly do against an emperor's will? As Imperial guards arrived to remove him from my presence, I added my final poisoned barb. Oh, and that tonic you've been drinking for your virility these past 5 years? The one you requested to ensure you would father many sons? It ensures you will never father children at all. A fitting curse for a man who values bloodlines above integrity. Would you not agree? The horror that spread across his face completed my revenge. As the guards dragged him away, I turned back to packing my belongings, my hands no longer trembling with emotion. The jade glow that surrounded them seemed colder now, more like the glow of the moon on a winter night than the warm luminescence of healing. Prince Huayu found me later, standing alone in the imperial garden, watching plum blossoms fall like snow in the evening breeze. "Are you satisfied with your justice?" he asked quietly, coming to stand beside me. I considered his question carefully. "I thought I would feel triumphant," I admitted. "Instead, I feel mostly empty." "Revenge often leaves us hollow," he observed. "Though I cannot say they didn't deserve their fate." "You knew what I was doing all along," I said, not a question but a realization. He nodded. "I remember the village healer with jade hands from 5 years ago, even if no one else does. I saw how they took credit for your miracle. I wondered if heaven would right that wrong someday." I turned to study his face, seeing genuine understanding there. "And you're willing to marry someone so calculating who spent years orchestrating another's downfall?" "I'm willing to marry someone with the patience and intelligence to achieve justice," he corrected. "Whether she chooses to use those qualities for revenge or healing in the future is her decision." For the first time since my rebirth, I felt tears threaten. Not for Kaichuan or what might have been, but for the unexpected possibility of a future I had never allowed myself to imagine, one where I was valued not just for my jade hands but for who I truly was. In the weeks that followed, preparations for my wedding to Prince Huayu consumed the palace. Imperial tailors measured me daily for elaborate robes, jewelers crafted jade ornaments for my hair, and court officials who had once looked through me now bowed deeply in my presence. I observed it all with a detached fascination, still adjusting to this unexpected turn in my path. The emperor continued to improve under my care, regaining his strength more fully than in my previous life. He summoned me often, not just for medical consultations but to hear my thoughts on various matters. Sometimes I wondered if he recalled my whispered confessions during his illness, the strange tale of another life where his daughter-in-law-to-be had died of heartbreak and poison. "You have old eyes," he told me once as I checked his pulse, "like someone who has lived more than one lifetime." I met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps some souls carry the wisdom of many journeys, Your Majesty." He nodded thoughtfully. "My son chooses well. The palace needs more than beauty and noble blood. It needs wisdom that comes from unexpected places." Word reached me that Kaichuan and Ruyi had not yet been sent into exile. They remained in a small residence at the edge of the palace grounds, their futures uncertain as they awaited final judgment. Court gossip suggested they spent their days in bitter arguments, each blaming the other for their downfall. I focused instead on establishing my position as imperial physician, training apprentices in my methods and creating a proper medical pavilion within the palace. Prince Huayu often joined me there, his scholarly mind quick to absorb the principles behind my remedies. "You never asked if I wanted to marry you," I said to him one afternoon as we catalogued medicinal herbs. He looked up, surprised. "Would you have preferred to refuse the emperor's decree?" "No," I admitted. "I merely wonder why you accepted so readily." Prince Huayu set down the herb he was examining. "5 years ago, when you first came to heal my father, I watched you work. While others saw only the miracle, I saw your methodical mind, your quiet determination. I admired you then, though protocol prevented me from saying so." "And now?" I asked. Now I admire your strength even more, he said simply. Though I hope that eventually, you might find peace more fulfilling than vengeance. His words stayed with me that night as I walked alone through the Imperial Gardens. The moon cast everything in silver light, reminding me of the jade glow of my hands when I prepared my most powerful remedies. I had achieved everything I'd planned in this second life: revenge against those who betrayed me, recognition of my true abilities, and a position far beyond what I could have imagined as a village apothecary. Yet Prince Huayu was right. The hollow feeling remained, a space within me that revenge had failed to fill. 3 days before our wedding, I decided to face what I had been avoiding. I requested permission to visit Kaishuan and Ruyi in their temporary residence. The Emperor granted it with a knowing look, as if he understood this was a necessary conclusion to the story I had whispered to him during his illness. Imperial guards escorted me to a modest house near the western wall of the palace complex. The building, while still finer than my original village home, represented a dramatic fall from the luxurious quarters they had once occupied. I found them in a small reception room. Ruyi sat stiffly on a wooden chair, her once perfect beauty now marred by the strain of disgrace. Kaishuan stood by the window, turning when I entered. The shock on their faces at my appearance, now dressed in the finery of an imperial bride-to-be, gave me a brief moment of satisfaction. "Apothecary Bai," Kaishuan managed, attempting to sound respectful rather than resentful. "You honor us with your presence." "I wanted to see you before your exile," I said, taking the seat a servant hastily offered. "To complete our tale." Ruyi's eyes narrowed. "You've already taken everything from us. What more could you want?" "Nothing," I replied honestly. "I have everything I once thought I wanted. I simply wish to understand if you comprehend why this happened to you." Kaiwan approached slowly, the handsome face that had once captivated me now lined with worry. "Because I chose her over you," he said, gesturing toward Ruyi. "Because I betrayed our engagement." I laughed softly. If that were all, I might have simply walked away. "No, Lord Zhao. This happened because you both stole what wasn't yours to take. You built your position on my achievement, claiming credit for a gift heaven bestowed on me, not you." "We didn't realize," Ruyi began, but I held up my hand, stopping her excuse. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said calmly. "You saw an opportunity to advance yourselves by stepping on someone you considered insignificant. You never imagined that insignificant person would rise to determine your fate. And now you've had your revenge," Kaishuan said bitterly. "You've made us childless, stripped us of position, and condemned us to exile. Are you satisfied at last?" I studied them both. These people who had once held such power over my heart and future, now they seemed smaller somehow, diminished not just by their circumstances, but by the pettiness of their ambitions. "I thought revenge would heal the wound you created," I admitted. "I spent years planning your downfall, watching you build your lives on stolen glory. Yet now that it's done, I find myself pitying you both." "We don't need your pity," Ruyi snapped, though tears filled her eyes. "Perhaps not," I agreed, rising to leave. "But you might need my mercy. I'll speak to the Emperor about commuting your exile to a less harsh province, not for your sakes, but for my own peace." As I turned to go, Kaishuan called after me. "Why, would you show mercy now, after orchestrating our destruction so completely?" I paused at the doorway. "Because I'm finally ready to let go of what happened in another lifetime. Your fate is no longer my concern." I left them there, surrounded by the remnants of their former glory, and felt lighter with each step away from their presence. The jade glow of my hands seemed warmer that evening as I prepared a tonic for the Emperor, more like the healing light it had been when I first discovered my gift. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright. As imperial attendants dressed, me in robes of red and gold, adorning my hair with jade ornaments and pearls, I caught sight of my reflection in a polished bronze mirror. The woman who looked back at me was neither the naive village healer who had died of heartbreak, nor the calculating avenger who had been reborn to deliver justice. She was someone new, someone who had walked both paths and chosen a third. Prince Huayu waited for me in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, dressed in imperial finery that did nothing to diminish the genuine warmth in his eyes when he saw me approach. The emperor himself presided over the ceremony, officially naming me imperial physician and princess consort in the same declaration. As we completed the traditional rites, I noticed a figure at the periphery of the celebration. Kaishuan stood watching, his face haggard with what might have been regret or simply envy. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded hall. I gave him a small nod, neither forgiveness nor gloating, merely acknowledgement that our story was finished. That evening, amid the continuing celebrations, word reached me that the emperor had commuted Kaishuan and Rui's sentence from exile to service in a southern province, far from court but not the hardship of the western frontier. Prince Huayu found me in a quiet corner after receiving the news. "Your request for mercy was granted," he said. "Was that what you truly wanted?" I considered his question carefully. What I truly wanted was justice, not endless suffering. They'll live with the consequences of their actions without my needing to oversee their punishment. He took my hand, his fingers gently tracing the jade glow that pulsed softly beneath my skin. "Your hands heal even when you aren't trying to," he observed. "Perhaps that's your true nature, beyond revenge or calculation?" "Perhaps," I agreed, finding myself smiling genuinely for what felt like the first time in 2 lifetimes. Though I'll never regret ensuring they understood the full cost of their betrayal. That night, as imperial lanterns illuminated the celebration of my new life, I touched my jade-glowing hands to my husband's cheek. "Some believe revenge is a dish best served cold," I whispered. "I say it's a medicine best administered slowly, drop by drop, until the cure is complete." Prince Huayu, wise enough to understand the depths behind my words, simply covered my hand with his own. Then I am fortunate to have married a healer who knows precisely the right dose. In that moment, I felt the last remnants of my past life finally release their hold. The bitter girl who had died of heartbreak, the calculating woman who had orchestrated a perfect revenge. Both were parts of me, but neither defined me completely. I had been reborn, not just to avenge a betrayal, but to discover who I truly was when given a second chance. As the celebration continued around us, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in watching Kaishuan and Rui fall. It was in rising so far beyond what they had tried to take from me that they became merely footnotes in my story rather than its conclusion. My hands glowed jade in the lantern light, but for the first time since my rebirth, the glow wasn't cold, with calculation, or hot with anger. It was warm with possibility, with the promise of a future I had crafted not from vengeance, but from my own strength and the unexpected gift of a second life. A year passed, like the turning of seasons in the Dai. Imperial Gardens. I established the Royal Medical Pavilion within the palace, training gifted apprentices in my methods and creating a repository of medical knowledge unlike any in the Empire. My marriage to Prince Huayu blossomed into a partnership of minds as much as hearts, his scholarly wisdom complementing my practical knowledge in ways that benefited the entire court. The emperor continued to thrive under my care, his previous brush with the wasting sickness now a distant memory. He often invited me to participate in court discussions, valuing my perspective as someone who had risen from humble origins to the highest ranks of imperial society. "My daughter-in-law sees what others miss," he would say when courtiers questioned the propriety of a former village healer advising on matters of state. "Her jade hands reveal truth as well as heal ailments." Reports occasionally reached us, from the southern province where Kaiswan and Rui had been sent. They had established a modest household there, far from the luxuries and intrigues of court life. Local officials described Lord Zhao as a changed man, more humble in his dealings, and diligent in his duties. Rui had opened a small school for local girls, teaching them reading and writing rather than focusing solely on her lost beauty. I received this news with quiet satisfaction. My revenge had not destroyed them completely, but had stripped away the false glory they had stolen, forcing them to build lives based on their own merits rather than deception. One autumn evening, as red leaves fell across the imperial gardens, Prince Huayu found me gathering herbs for winter remedies. "You seem content," he observed, helping me collect the last of the chrysanthemum flowers before frost could claim them. "I am," I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. The hollow feeling that had plagued me after achieving my revenge had gradually filled with purpose and connection. Though sometimes I still dream of my village, of the simple apothecary shop where I began. He studied me thoughtfully. "Do you miss that life?" I considered his question carefully. "Not the life itself, but perhaps the directness of it. There, I healed whoever came to my door without concern for court politics or proper protocol." A week later, Prince Huayu presented me with plans for a public medical pavilion to be built in the city beyond the palace walls, a place where I could treat common people alongside my royal duties. The emperor approved the project immediately, understanding that my gift was meant to reach beyond the confines of court. "You continue to surprise me," I told my husband as we reviewed the plans together. "Most princes would prefer their wives safely contained within the palace. Most princes haven't married a woman with jade hands and 2 lifetimes of wisdom," he replied with a smile. "Your strength lies in balancing both worlds. I would never clip your wings." As spring arrived, bringing new growth to the imperial gardens, I received unexpected news. A servant arrived at my medical pavilion with an urgent message from the southern province. Lord Kaiswan had fallen gravely ill with symptoms that local physicians could not identify. Rui, in desperation, had petitioned the emperor for my assistance. "You are not obligated to help them," the emperor told me when I brought the petition to him. "After their betrayal, no one would fault you for declining." "What would you advise, Father?" I asked, having earned the right to address him so familiarly. He considered for a moment. "As emperor, I would say justice has already been served. Their fate is no longer your concern." Then he smiled slightly. "But as a father who was saved by your jade hands, I would say healing is your true gift. Perhaps using it even for those who wronged you would bring its own form of peace." That evening, I discussed the situation with Prince Huayu. We sat in our private garden, watching fireflies dance among the flowering plum trees. "Would helping him feel like surrendering your justice?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. Justice was achieved when they faced the consequences of their deception. This is something different. Then what holds you back?" I traced the jade glow that pulsed beneath my skin, brighter in the evening darkness. "Perhaps I fear that seeing them again will reawaken the bitterness I've worked so hard to leave behind." He took my glowing hand in his. "Or perhaps it will confirm how far beyond them you've truly risen." The next morning, I prepared for the journey with a small retinue of guards and apprentices. The emperor provided an imperial palanquin and documents ensuring we would receive every courtesy along the way. Prince Huayu insisted on accompanying me, understanding that this journey represented the final chapter in a story that had defined much of my second life. We traveled for 10 days through blooming countryside, the world awakening from winter's sleep, just as I had awakened from death years before. Each village we passed reminded me of my origins, of the simple healer I had been before betrayal and rebirth transformed me. When we arrived at the southern province capital, local officials greeted us with elaborate ceremony, clearly nervous about hosting imperial visitors. They led us to the residence where Kaishuan and Rui had established their new life, a modest compound that nonetheless reflected care and attention. Rui met us at the entrance, years of humility having softened her once haughty beauty. She fell to her knees when she saw me, pressing her forehead to the ground in the deepest form of respect. "Princess consort, imperial physician," she said, her voice trembling. "We are unworthy of your assistance, yet I beg for your mercy. My husband suffers greatly." I gestured for her to rise. "Take me to him." She led us through the residence, to a sick room where Kaishuan lay pale and wasted on a simple bed. His once handsome face was gaunt, his breathing labored. I recognized the symptoms immediately, a rare form of blood poisoning that mimicked the wasting sickness but progressed more rapidly. His eyes widened when he saw me, recognition and shame crossing his face. "Liwa," he whispered, using my familiar name from a lifetime ago. "You came." "I am the imperial physician," I replied evenly. "Healing is my duty." For 3 days, I worked to counteract the poison in his blood, preparing remedies and administering treatments while Prince Huayu assisted. Rui hovered anxiously, her concern for her husband appearing genuine despite their reduced circumstances. During my treatments, I learned more about their life in exile. They had initially struggled with resentment and blame, each accusing the other of causing their downfall. But gradually, stripped of false glory and forced to rely on their true abilities, they had found a kind of redemption in simplicity. The school for local girls was Rui's idea, Kaishuan told me during a moment of lucidity. She said if she could not have children of her own, she would ensure other girls had opportunities she never considered important before. On the 4th day, his fever broke. The color returned to his face as the treatment finally took hold. When I checked his pulse that evening, I knew he would recover fully. "Why did you save me?" he asked when we were momentarily alone. "After everything I did to you, everything we took from you." I considered my answer carefully, wanting truth rather than platitudes. "Partly because healing is the gift heaven gave me, and I won't dishonor it by withholding it out of spite, but mostly because your life or death no longer has power over mine. I've moved beyond needing your suffering to validate my worth." Tears filled his eyes. "I don't deserve your mercy." "Perhaps not," I agreed. "But mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to break cycles rather than perpetuate them." As we prepared to depart the following day, Rui presented me with a small wooden box. Inside lay a jade hairpin I recognized instantly, the one Kaishuan had given me during our courtship in my first life, which she had later claimed as her own. "This never belonged to me," she said quietly. "I cannot undo the past, but I can, at least, return what was rightfully yours." I studied the simple hairpin, once so precious to me that losing it had felt like losing part of myself. Now it seemed like a relic from another woman's life. "Keep it," I told her, closing the box and returning it to her hands, "as a reminder that our worth comes from what we create, not what we take from others." As our palanquin carried us back toward the capital, Prince Huayu observed, "You've given them more than healing. You've given them a chance at redemption." "Everyone deserves that chance," I replied, watching the countryside pass by. "Even those who once denied it to others." He took my hand, tracing the jade glow that pulsed beneath my skin. "Your hands were always meant to heal, not harm. That's the true power heaven blessed you with." I smiled, realizing a profound truth. In my first life, I thought being valued by others determined my worth. In my second, I thought ensuring justice would heal my wounds. But perhaps the real gift of rebirth was learning that I alone define who I am and what my power means. 3 years after our return from the southern province, the emperor announced his intention to step down from active rule, naming Prince Huayu as his successor. The court buzzed with surprise, as the eldest prince had long been considered the natural heir. Yet no one could deny Huayu's thoughtful leadership or the wisdom he had demonstrated in the years since our marriage. The empire needs a ruler who values knowledge above conquest, healing above glory, the emperor declared during the formal announcement. My son and his jade-handed consort will lead our people into an era of prosperity and enlightenment. The coronation ceremony was scheduled for the following spring, giving us time to prepare for the immense responsibility that would soon be ours. My public medical pavilion in the city had become a center for healing and learning, drawing talented students from throughout the empire. Now I would need to balance these duties with the ceremonial responsibilities of an empress. "Are you afraid?" Huayu asked one evening as we walked through our private garden, the cherry blossoms floating around us like pink snow. "Not of the position itself," I replied honestly. "But sometimes I wonder if heaven returned me to life for this purpose, or if I've strayed from some intended path." He considered my words thoughtfully. "Perhaps the gift of rebirth wasn't to follow a predetermined path, but to show you that all paths were open to you." A month before the coronation, I received a message that Lord Keixuan and Lady Rui had requested permission to attend the ceremony. They had maintained their modest position in the southern province, gradually earning respect through diligent service rather than deception. Their request to witness our ascension surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "What will you do?" Prince Huayu asked when I showed him the message. I thought of the bitter girl who had died of heartbreak, of the calculating woman who had orchestrated revenge, and of the healer I had become who understood that true power lay in choices, not retribution. Invite them, I decided. Their presence will remind us both where we began and how far we've come. The day of the coronation arrived with perfect spring weather, as if heaven itself blessed the transition. The Forbidden City gleamed with fresh paint and new banners, while citizens from throughout the empire lined the streets, hoping for a glimpse of their new emperor and empress. As attendants dressed me in the elaborate robes of imperial yellow, adorning my hair with the phoenix crown that symbolized the empress, I caught sight of my jade-glowing hands against the rich fabric. They seemed brighter today, pulsing with a warmth that spread through my entire being. The ceremony proceeded with ancient rituals, each step carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. When the moment came for me to kneel before the imperial ancestors, accepting my role as empress, I felt a strange doubling of time, as if the girl who had once mixed herbs in a village hut now stood beside the woman in imperial robes, both equally real and equally me. After the formal ceremony came the court reception, where nobles and officials offered congratulations and pledged loyalty to the new emperor. Among the sea of ornate robes and elaborate headdresses, I spotted Keixuan and Ruyi, dressed respectably, but simply, waiting at the edge of the great hall. When their turn came to approach the throne, they performed the full kowtow, pressing their foreheads to the marble floor in deep respect. 5 years of provincial life had weathered Keixuan's once handsome face, while Rui's beauty had mellowed into something more genuine than the calculated perfection she had once maintained. "Your Majesties," Keixuan said, his voice steady though. I could sense his nervousness. "We offer our humble congratulations and eternal loyalty to your rule." Beside me, Emperor Huayu nodded graciously. "Lord Zhao, Lady Rui, we appreciate your journey to witness this transition." I studied them, these people who had once held such power over my heart and fate. Now they stood before me not as the architects of my destruction, but as minor nobles, seeking favor from the throne I occupied. The perfect symmetry of our reversed positions might once have filled me with vindictive pleasure. Instead, I felt only the quiet satisfaction of a story reaching its proper conclusion. "Your school for young women in the southern province has been noted with interest," I said to Ruyi, watching surprise flicker across her face that I had kept track of her activities. "Perhaps you would consider expanding such education more broadly under imperial patronage." Hope bloomed in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. "I would be honored, Your Majesty, though I am unworthy of such notice." "We all begin unworthy," I replied. "It is what we build through our own efforts that defines us in the end." Later that evening, when most of the court had withdrawn and only close advisors remained, Kaishuan approached me in the imperial garden where I had gone for a moment of solitude. He maintained a respectful distance, bowing deeply before speaking. "Empress Li Hua," he said, using my given name with my new title. "May I speak frankly one last time?" I nodded, curious what he felt needed saying after all these years. "When you saved my life in the southern province, I believed it was either extraordinary mercy or the final move in your long game of revenge, proving your superiority once and for all." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But watching you today, I finally understand it was neither. Your healing was simply an expression of who you truly are, beyond the wounds I inflicted." I considered his insight, surprised by its accuracy. "And who do you believe I truly am, Lord Zhao?" "Someone who was always meant for jade and gold, regardless of what path brought you there." He bowed again, deeper this time. "In our previous life, I saw only a useful stepping stone when I should have recognized a phoenix rising." With those words, he withdrew, returning to where Ruyi waited at the edge of the garden. I watched them leave, arms linked in a gesture of genuine connection that had been absent in their court days of calculated ambition. Emperor Huayu found me still standing, among the flowering trees, my jade-glowing hands tracing the patterns of blossoms against the night sky. "Did he seek forgiveness?" my husband asked, coming to stand beside me. "No," I replied. "I think he finally understood that this was never about him at all. My story would have led here regardless of his role in it." Huayu smiled. "The mark of true wisdom is recognizing when you are merely a character in someone else's tale rather than its center." That night, as imperial lanterns cast golden light across the forbidden city that was now our home, I stood on the high terrace overlooking the capital. Below, thousands of smaller lights twinkled as citizens celebrated their new emperor and the Jade Empress, as they had begun to call me. I thought of the girl who had died of heartbreak and poison, of the woman who had been reborn with cold purpose, and of the healer who had ultimately found a path beyond both vengeance and victimhood. Each was part of me. Each had contributed to who I had become, yet none alone defined me. 5 years into my second life, I had believed the perfect revenge would heal the wounds of betrayal. I had orchestrated Kaishuan and Rui's downfall with meticulous care, watching them lose everything they had gained through deception. But true healing had come not from their suffering, but from my own transformation, from building something greater than what had been taken from me. As Empress, I would establish healing pavilions throughout the empire, train generations of physicians in my methods, and ensure that even the humblest village child with a gift would find recognition, rather than exploitation. My jade hands would serve a purpose far beyond the petty ambitions that had once threatened to diminish them. Emperor Huayu joined me on the terrace, placing his hand over mine where the jade glow pulsed steadily in the darkness. "What are you thinking, my empress?" he asked. I turned to him, this man who had seen my worth when others had not, who had offered partnership rather than possession. I was thinking that heaven's greatest gift wasn't the jade in my hands or even the second chance at life, I replied. It was the wisdom to recognize that we choose our own worth, and no one can take it unless we allow them to. A lesson well worth 2 lifetimes to learn, he agreed. Together we watched the celebration lights below, the future spreading before us like a vast sea of possibilities. The story of the betrayed village healer and her calculated revenge had concluded. The story of the Jade Empress was just beginning. And in that moment, with the weight of imperial responsibility upon my shoulders and the warmth of hard-won wisdom in my heart, I was finally, completely free.